Welcome to The Green Rush, a podcast about the business of cannabis. On a weekly basis, hosts Ann Donahoe and Louis Goldberg talk with the CEOs, politicians, and cultural icons driving the cannabis industry forward. This week, Louis and Ann chat with Adam Orens, founding partner of the Marijuana Policy Group, a Denver-based economic and policy consulting firm nationally recognized for its role in shaping regulated medical and adult use cannabis markets. The Marijuana Policy Group regularly provides actionable research and analysis that empowers businesses, government agencies, and investors to make informed decisions within the regulated cannabis industry. This is a show about data. Don't let that deter you. The numbers and the stories here today are fascinating. Don't sit back, lean forward. And now on to our interview with Adam Orens.
So Adam, thanks for joining us. We're really psyched to chat with you today. Before we dive in, can you tell us a little bit in your own words what exactly you do at the Marijuana Policy Group and what the heck is the Marijuana Policy Group?
And if you want to use somebody else's words, feel free to use their words.
Sure. Well, thank you all for having me. Really excited to be here and to talk with you guys. So I'm Adam Orens. I'm the founding partner of the Marijuana Policy Group. We're a full-service cannabis consulting firm, and we do work with businesses and governments. We have completed market research, economic studies on new cannabis markets. My training is as an economist, actually an agricultural economist. Who never thought he'd be applying that knowledge in quite this way. But we have been working with the Colorado Marijuana Enforcement Division since 2014. We've helped them define how large their market was for the first time in 2014, and we just helped them look at it again just this year. We've also helped them define some of their regulations, participated in a lot of the early regulatory meetings that define the system. And then from there, we've gone on to do it for other governments. We just finished a project with Health Canada, similarly looking at the size of the market for them as they first set out to regulate it.
Dude, you're front running my questions.
Excuse me. Sorry, Louis. Don't mean to steal your thunder there.
Oh.
But so we've also done the same thing on the private side, right? We've helped a lot of groups get licenses, understand and form some of their first business plans in states around the U.S. So that's it. That's it quickly. But we continue to do work as this industry gets bigger, more capital is coming in. That capital needs to understand where to go, and we help with that.
Well, that's very cool. And for us, it's really cool to talk to somebody who is, not on the growing side or the dispensing side, but really helping to think through the bigger issues that are going on in the industry and then feeding it back to all the market participants. You mentioned Canada, and October 17th is like the big matzo ball date that's on everybody's calendar, right? It's right. Like I keep hearing in my head, oh, Canada. And it's like, I was just up there and the illicit market is still, hyper present everywhere. But you mentioned the big project you completed for Health Canada to give a size of what the illicit market may be. You want to talk about that and then why, like our understanding, your numbers are different than what the other estimates have been and why yours are different?
Sure. So our numbers were probably about 100 tons higher than the largest number. We said there'd be about 925 metric tons. That's 925 million grams of cannabis demand. And that is measured no matter, that's the demand side, right? That is irrespective of where it comes from. That's how much cannabis is demanded in Canada, whether they get it from the medical market, whether they get it from the the upcoming regulated adult use market, or whether they get it from the illicit market. And it was larger than everybody thought. I think it's almost a third larger than their previous estimate from their budget office. And I think really what it came down to is the impact of heavy cannabis consumers.
Yeah, that's 25 grams per person, right? Like there's 36 in Canada. That's a lot. That's a lot.
Yes, it is a lot. But what we've seen is, and we've done direct surveys, we saw that the heaviest 20% of those consumers that consume cannabis every day are consuming almost 2 grams of cannabis a day, about over 1.7. I think it was 1.72 grams per day are being consumed by those heavy consumers every day.
Wait, so I don't think in terms of grams. I think in terms of like either like a joint or an edible. So can you convert? Because like I can't envision what 1 gram is. So what is that equivalent to?
1 gram. Well, here's an easy way that everybody can look at it. A commercially produced tobacco cigarette has about 1 gram of tobacco in it, about 0.8 or 0.9 grams of tobacco in it. Just because people roll their joints bigger or smaller, some of them have more than a gram, but I would consider that two large tobacco cigarettes full of cannabis per day. And that's also, it's kind of a proxy. They could consume that same amount of THC in edible form. Well, not in Canada to start, but in oil form, et cetera. But that's how the surveys work. When we survey somebody, we ask them how often they consume cannabis per month, and then we also ask them how much they consume on a day. And it skews. The heavier consumers also consume more per day, as you would expect. But those heavy consumers represent about 20% of the cannabis consuming population, and they demand 80% or more of the product. And we've seen that occur in Colorado. We've seen that occur everywhere we've worked, including Canada. They're no different. Although what we saw that was different than some of the surveys we did in Colorado and in Washington State, that 1.72 number in Canada was only 1.6 in Colorado. So the heavier consumers are consuming slightly more in Canada.
Well, it's colder up there.
Yeah, right. And, that was something that people don't understand yet. Most of the folks that do these projections, whether it's like a state budget office or somebody in a company that's trying to do a little back of the envelope math, they just look at how many people and an average consumption amount, and they often skew low on those projections.
So my question is, how quickly will this, let's say 20%, flip to consuming off of the black market?
So let me tell you what I've seen.
Is that a weird way to put that question?
No, absolutely not. I think that's a very important question. I mean, that's something that they're asking themselves in California right now, too.
Yeah.
But this is something that we've seen go relatively quickly in Colorado, and everything's relative here. By comparison, in adult use states, it's gone relatively quickly in Colorado and slower in Washington State and slower in California. And it's chalked up to just a couple things. This cannabis is becoming a discretionary consumer purchase, right? It has to be convenient for you to get, and it has to cost the right amount. And those heavy consumers are very price sensitive because they spend more of their annual income on cannabis than anybody else. And so they become very price sensitive. And so if it's not at the right price for them, they're going to, and they already have entrenched supply methods too. They already have relationships with the illicit
they don't
market.
care. They don't care that the illicit market may be providing them with cannabis that's either been grown with heavy metals or pesticides, or that the actual dosing isn't right. I mean, they don't care about that. They only care about price.
No, I think all of that matters, but the price matters just as much. right? What I've said before is that the price of legal cannabis needs to be maybe just slightly more than what can be bought on the illicit market because of those things that you mentioned, right? That also should have a value. But what we've seen in Colorado was the shift didn't really start happening until there were enough stores open. It was easy to get. The price came down to about what it was on the illicit market here in Colorado, what was existing. And then we saw massive increases in sales in the regulated market. Those increases were slower in Washington because there weren't enough stores open. Prices were higher. Taxes were a lot higher. Now, let's talk back about Canada. You are going to have plenty of cannabis that will be grown in short order. All those companies up there have gone public. They're raising a lot of capital. They're expanding their grows. But I really think there's a lot of government involvement in the distribution channels, and those are going to be slow to start. And they're going to have a lot of distribution bottlenecks, and the illicit market will prevail in Canada as long as those bottlenecks prevail.
So that leads to my follow-up question, which you just sort of answered, is it ready, or is it going to be a total shit show by October 18th?
I think it's going to be chaotic. I think it's more the latter for sure. I wish them the best, but nobody has been able to open a market without some tripping over themselves.
You mean you like Massachusetts, which still hasn't got it figured out?
Yeah, they're slow too there, and they're taking a very, very measured approach.
Nevada seems to be the only one that got it right? I mean, out of the gate.
I think they did very well, and there are two things about Nevada and Colorado to a certain extent that some of these other places don't have that's very important, which is a well-developed regulated medical program that is already regulated and already has processes in place. And those were quickly ported over to adult use markets in Colorado and Nevada. And Washington didn't have that. California doesn't have that. Canada doesn't really have that on the distribution side. And Massachusetts did not either.
So do you think that bodes well for New Jersey, which is opening up the medical market more, and they've changed the conditions to pretty much anybody, but it's still tightly controlled at the production side, at the processing and the dispensing side. So do you think that is setting up a good paradigm for New Jersey, or do you think that New Jersey is just going to be the same kind of shit show that California was or is and Massachusetts is?
As a northern New Jersey native, I definitely
represent.
And Rutgers grad, right?
Yes, I am a Rutgers grad. Absolutely.
Are you rah, baby?
Hoorah, hoorah, Rutgers rah. All right. I think New Jersey is moving in the right direction. But I think something that a lot of these places are missing is it's still very tightly controlled. And at no point did Colorado ever limit the number of licenses from the top down. And I think, when you have these severely limited groups of license holders, it sets up market conditions where there is not as much competition to downwardly influence the price. And so, I think New Jersey's moving in the right direction. I think they could set themselves up to shift to the adult use market smoother with what they're doing. But there's a lot of people that live in New Jersey, and I don't think it's that convenient to buy medical cannabis products in New Jersey right now at all.
Oh, it is not. As a card holder in New Jersey, it is not. It is an absurd system. But I have a slightly different follow-up because you were talking about the structure of the market and how either elastic or inelastic it is regarding price. But as the medical markets open up and as the medical markets evolve into adult use markets, are we seeing a change in new users? There's the myth that the cannabis user of tomorrow is a 40-year-old mom who's never smoked a joint before. Are you guys seeing this kind of data, or is it still the vast majority of users are the historic users who are converting from the illicit to the green market?
I think the current users are definitely who everybody thinks they are. Younger, skewing male, 18 or 21 to 35 demographic. Those are still the larger demographics, especially of the heavier consumers. But the faster growing segments are, I think we've seen in Colorado, the fastest growing segment was the over 50 years old segment. I think that's I think what's coming. I think nobody really knows what's going to happen in terms of how this product will grow and who will use it. People use it for so many reasons, right? People use it for recreation and for treating ailments and symptoms. And I think there's a lot's going to change in the coming years. And I think this product will be a little more normalized. And so you're going to see faster growing segments outside of the core that we think about and have seen in movies.
Adam, I want to go back to Colorado for a moment. You're based there. It's the mecca of cannabis. You guys are considered the Colorado cannabis economists. And we talked about why it's been a little bit more successful than Washington or Oregon and maybe California, although it's early. But you've just finished a big project for them, talking about how they've effectively absorbed the illicit market into the regulated market. My bigger question is, how do you actually measure that?
That's a great question. So we go at it a couple of ways, right? From the supply side and the demand side. We use the state's inventory tracking system, which is called Metric, which tracks all the movements of cannabis from when it's first grown to when it's harvested to when it's sold and processed. And
the state owns that system?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yes, the state has a software contractor that provides it for them, but the state owns the data. So we calculated all the sales, right? We see all the sales at a transaction level, and we rolled that back up to state level. We also have some proprietary methods that we've developed working for the state that puts all of the different cannabis products to a similar unit. We call it flower equivalent. So we're able to take an edible and roll it back to how much flour was used to produce that edible. So we add all that up and we see how much cannabis is sold, right? And that was 300 tons of cannabis sold in 2017. And then we look at the demand side, just like I was talking about with Canada. We look at federal surveys and some state surveys that tell us how many cannabis consumers there are in Colorado. We then estimate their consumption based on those surveys and some primary work that we did with the state on cannabis use. And then we also add in tourism information from the state tourism sources that we have, and it looks at how many people are
you
coming
tracking
to the
me?
The state's tracking people that come in and out, DIA every day, but there's no
Twitter is tracking you.
There's no enhanced tracking. Yeah, that I know.
No, I meant you personally, but so can we talk about the data for a second? You guys have analyzed and looked at reams and reams of it. Anything in there that really stunned you? Like, holy shit, I never thought, or was it all right on the nose?
One of the things that surprised us for the longest time is how long the medical cannabis market lasted in Colorado. So that's starting to decline now, but sales were steady in that for several years, and that surprised us. We were also surprised at how quickly the market grew here. But we looked at it and said, we think it's going to settle eventually. What we're seeing here really is a very fast growth because the illicit market is transitioning into the regulated market. And then between 2014 and 2018, that's what we've been seeing, that transition. That's why growth is so quick.
So are you allowed to take your learnings and your methodology from Colorado and project it for the future of other states? So in other words, can you project the demise of the black market for other markets?
Yeah, we can. I think Colorado is a picture of the most mature cannabis market, and I think there are a lot of lessons that can be taken and applied. We do it all the time. We've seen what worked and what doesn't. We understand kind of how large demand is in certain areas and how much cultivation is needed in certain areas. And so we are looking forward to helping lots of other jurisdictions think about this, or businesses that are starting to look at a market.
Just to put it into context or perspective, what percentage of the current Colorado market is licit and what percentage is still illicit?
I think most of it, if not all. All measurable cannabis use is occurring in the regulated market. There are still small pockets of items like home grows and people that purchase their medical cannabis from other people that are called caregivers, but that's a really small population. So I think for residents, the black market, the illicit market is all but gone. What there is, though, is there are illegal cultivators and distributors in Colorado who are not licensed by the state, who are here growing cannabis and shipping it out of Colorado because Colorado has developed an illicit market brand in other areas of the country. So, even right now, as we sit here today, Denver and Colorado is the closest adult use market that's open to the East Coast. So we still see there's still cannabis illegal being transported out, but it's not to serve residents in Colorado. That's by and large been absorbed.
Sometime this year, and they're looking like October, Boston will be the closest market to New York that is adult use. Do you think that the Massachusetts market will evolve similar to Colorado, both in terms of the dissolution of the illicit market over the next couple of years, and then a secondary illicit market for shipping to states like New York or New Jersey if they are not since legal?
I think that risk is absolutely real and definitely there. I think that a lot of other states like New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, they're all looking to go quickly. I think they're all looking to legalize quickly, and there are large groups within those states that are really pushing for that in and outside of the legislature. So I think Massachusetts, yes, they're setting up to have a customer base that is broader than their own state lines, like we've had here in Colorado.
I have to imagine that your clients almost serve as a crystal ball kind of into the future of cannabis. Are there any states that might be too broad, or municipalities or even companies that have come to you for projects that have surprised you? You don't have to disclose actual names if you don't want to, but given that states like Oklahoma just passed medical, although I just read that they're advising doctors not to prescribe, which is dopey. Oh, no pun intended there. But and it's on the ballot in states like North Dakota. So I'm guessing that every red state is looking into it. But is there anyone that's come to you that you've kind of been like, interesting?
Yeah, I have actually a pretty interesting one that I think you guys will like. In an unnamed state, in an unnamed municipality approached us to look at ways that they could do more beyond just taxing cannabis. They wanted to get in the business, and they wanted to think about interesting ways that they could not just have a customary, public sector tax, but have more of like a concessionaire agreement.
Like a state liquor
Yeah.
store in New Hampshire,
Right.
Massachusetts.
Yes.
Right. The control.
Right. And so, but what they would really do is the municipality would hold all the licenses from the state within their municipality, and then they would just contract with operators to operate, the stores. So I thought that was the most interesting request. And it didn't come from, some wild-eyed entrepreneur. It came from a city council somewhere.
Was it? I know you're not going to give specifics, but it was
not in Colorado.
No. Was it a bigger city, or like, are we talking about a town like with like 15 or 20,000 people? Or are we talking like a couple of 100,000 people?
Larger than a town.
Wow, that's brilliant. You know what? That's really brilliant. It would provide a source of revenue. It's a really, really creative idea.
Yeah, but it's it's met with such trepidation here in the U.S. and it's another funny thing when I've done work in Mexico and Canada, Western Europe, and they look at what we're doing here in the U.S. as something that there's to have more trepidation about, because there nowhere in the world is as much of capitalists as we are here,
But we were the source of the anti-cannabis sentiment, and they have all, they are true believers, but, we're also the ones who are flipping the script they're going to follow, right? I mean, look at what's going on in Germany. It is a very interesting market that's developing there.
Yeah, I mean, all over Europe, those thoughts, though, of let's nationalize it first, the countries are having those discussions, and that's not what happens here first. This cannabis got legalized here, and let's get some logos on it and sell it. That's the American way. But in Canada, they look at it more like, okay, this is a potentially dangerous material that is now going to be legal for consumption, and we have to make sure it's controlled and not used so much. And here, the controls are not as strong. And that goes for any consumer product. It's not just cannabis, but it's liquor, it's tobacco, it's other, other products that we have here. But that's just something I learned along the way, that you just get reminded again that we are the most capitalist society, not that good or bad, it just is something that was eye-opening. And I never really thought like that until, you listen to people from Canada, from Mexico, I was listening to some people from France and from Germany talking like that.
I just came back from a vacation in Italy where apparently it's legal. And I wanted to do some more research, but the dispensary that we had walked into, it's low THC as regulated by the country, but it all comes from, at least in this particular store, Amsterdam. So they were importing all of their cannabis, which is just that, I don't know, as coming from the States where you can't cross the state line, it kind of blew my mind a little. Why would Italy leave that on the table? But I just thought that was really interesting. But
what's also popular over there, I hear too, is smoking hemp flowers. We may be talking about the same thing, but it's very low THC flower, high CBD, and it's used almost in some ways for tobacco cessation and just as a CBD delivery device.
Yeah, and we were also in Portugal where we looked it up, and hemp was legal. But traditional cannabis and flower was not. So I think that's really interesting, and the fact that that's the avenue they decide to go. And Portugal's a pretty conservative country, so I don't know. Someone will correct me if I got that wrong. But so we talked business, but now let's talk about you specifically. What brought you into cannabis? It sounds like agriculture and economics, but take us through your journey.
Absolutely.
It sounds like exactly what you described at the beginning.
No, but how did you what are your colleagues and your...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'll try and not make this story so long, but, I've been in Colorado since 2000. I went to grad school, really chose something to keep me out west, so I never had to move back to the East Coast. I studied agricultural and natural resource economics. I started working right after grad school with a firm in Denver called BBC Research and Consulting, and we did a lot of economic public policy work, a lot of work around land use, urban planning, land development, work in the ski resorts, work with governments. I did a lot of work for the military, doing retail planning on military bases all over the world, really. And one November evening in 2012, I was literally sitting on my couch watching the election results come in. And I saw that we legalized cannabis in Colorado by a wider margin than we reelected Obama. And at first I was just sitting there with my mouth open. I didn't really think we were going to legalize cannabis here. I just thought it was, something that would come and go like it had a few times before in California and other states, Colorado one time before, I think even. And, then it just hit me that, there's going to be an industry forming here, a new industry in Colorado. It's not just going to be about mining and vacations and skiing and tech and all the other things that are big in Colorado, but this is going to be a truly Colorado industry, and they're going to need help. And so about a month later, through some common contacts I had, I went to a very early NCIA meeting. If it's come a long way, because this was in like the back room of a kind of, slightly divey bar in North Denver. And in the back room were the most excited people in the world at that moment, talking about what had just happened and talking about what this means and how the state's going to proceed, and just talking about all of what's to come. And I thought, wow, I just got to introduce myself to as many people in this room as possible. And so fast forward a little bit, I was the first person like me, I believe, that introduced themselves to the people that had just legalized cannabis in Colorado. And they were happy to have me. I told them about what I've been doing and how I thought it could fit. And I started doing a lot of work for groups going for licenses in states like Illinois, Massachusetts, Florida. And I developed some of the earliest market studies for medical cannabis at that point. And so I just kept taking this consulting practice that existed and kind of pivoted it over, and then just kind of kept going year by year, until maybe I think it's 2016, maybe it took about 2 years. And then I was just doing cannabis projects full time. Another big milestone for us was when we won the first competitive project to do a market size study for the state of Colorado in 2014. And that kind of set us on a bit of a course. And so that's how we got in. And ever since, you learn something and then you see how relevant it is everywhere else you go. And I think we've had a tremendous opportunity to do that here in Colorado. And that's why you see so many people that started here and are now have national coverage with their brand or national practices with consulting or lawyering or accounting or whatever they're doing. So that's really the story.
So you've seen this entire industry grow up, and you've worked with regulators and legislators in Colorado and around the country. I'm sure that there have been these moments where you've been across the table from a regulator in another state who's outside of Colorado, and they have this look like a deer in headlights, like, oh shit, what the fuck am I going to do now? I actually have to bring some structure to this industry. Or are they now all kind of like talking to each other? Because I know, like, for example, that the state legislature in New Jersey took, a lot of members took a field trip to Nevada in the spring to talk to the legislators in Nevada about how they structured their market. Are the local guys getting smarter, or are they still don't know what the heck to do?
I think it's some of both. we do see a lot of like what you just said. I think actually about a year and a half earlier, that same group of New Jersey state legislators was here in Colorado. We've hosted people from all over the world here, take them on tours, introduce them to the government people. So there's a lot of.
Oh, wait, do they actually get high? I mean, I don't want to know who, but in general, do they go, oh, well, it's legal. Why don't I?
I would say probably about most of them do, to be honest.
Probably about most. That's a good number.
And the ones who don't are going.
I'll put the over under at 65%. But that's another thing that surprised me. That I mean, really, and I'll just put it as kind of simply as I can. It's like what you don't realize is that more people than you think, use this now or have in the past and favor people using it now. That's something that I never thought was true, but that became apparent to me when I saw, politicians from state X getting really excited about going to a dispensary after their meetings were over. But it's like the flip side, though, Louis, to get back to one of the things you said, what happens though in all these states is they take the best, most qualified person that's local that they can and put them in place. And, oftentimes they have experience with regulating other controlled substances, whether that be alcohol or gambling or gaming or firearms or, other things. And they install them as the head cannabis regulator, and it's more nuanced and more difficult than you think. So there's always a learning curve. I think they're always the best intentions, but things go difficult in other states because there are other priorities. And then one other thing that I think is important that you guys, I think, would appreciate that I've observed is the states that go the slowest are the ones that don't have ballot measures. Ballot measures is what this is all about, direct ballot measures. That's what happened in Colorado. That's what happened in the West. And then the legislators and the regulators have to react quickly. And so the systems get up and running, and then they get adjusted once they're in place. States that go slowly, they can argue over these things on the legislative floor forever, and they get killed in committee, and it's better luck till next year, and it's just this process that takes longer, and they'll eventually get there because they have to. New York is going to look over in Massachusetts and say, for the good of the region, we need to do this. Yeah.
I want that money.
Well, and while we're talking politics, I mean, this could all kind of go away if it's descheduled. So we ask a lot of our guests to look into their crystal ball and see, do you think in the near future it will be descheduled or rescheduled? And what does day one look like after that happens? And what does day 2000 look like after that happens? So loaded question.
Yeah,
go.
Absolutely. Glad to take a shot at it. So I think rescheduling will come before descheduling. And I think that interstate commerce is longer than most people think, because I believe there's going to be this period where states will try and protect their tax bases and will not want to allow free trade, so to speak. So I think it's still going to take some time. I think, the state legislators can say one thing, but then, the DEA and the federal apparati have all said that, we need medicine to come first. We need this to be proven medically effective before we move it off Schedule 1 to anywhere.
Why? I just don't. I know why, but why?
I don't know. I think it's these are law enforcement
but they know better.
Agencies.
But they really do know better. If you talk to a real member of law enforcement, none of them, I've never heard a cop say, you know what, it is really fucking addictive. It really is as bad as heroin. They all go, it's better than anything else. They all agree to it. I don't
And
get it.
those are the folks that are, I think, more in the front lines. I think it's the people in that have been career and in the top hallways of these federal institutions that might not understand the magnitude of what they're doing. But with lots of things, we've seen it happen with gay marriage. We've seen it happen where it's sort of a tipping point thing that happens. So maybe sanity will reign further on down the road once there's a majority of states. It's a real tough and cloudy crystal ball, unfortunately. And it's tough to really think about 20 years from now when, it's still state by state.
I don't think so. I think that Trump, and I've said this for the last couple of months now, that I think Trump in October reschedules it. Doesn't deschedule it, but he does something to reschedule it so that he can claim that he made pot legal. And it's to stem off a blue wave, because he knows that pot polls higher than anything else.
It's a good theory. I like that theory. I've never heard that theory, Louis. I like it. It would also be a great diversionary tactic to all the other trouble that the administration has now.
Yeah. And it fucks the politics of it all up, because the progressives have tried to own this issue, and it seems like they've lost that it's more the conservatives who are. I mean, look, I love Cory Booker, and if he runs for president, I'll vote for him. If Kamala Harris runs for president, I'll vote for her. I can't vote for both of them, so you guys, my vote is up for sale.
It never would have passed here, Louis, if we didn't get the right here, meaning Colorado. If we didn't get the libertarian, free will, libertarians, to agree with something that the progressives do, and that's how these are passed.
And that's why I think he's going to do it.
Yeah,
It
fits.
It does. And it's such a black swan thing that it's in line with who he is. And I think that it drives the Democrats nuts. Like, we all lose our fucking minds.
So Donald Trump, if you're listening.
Which is really his priority number one.
Yeah. He wants to troll the libs, right?
Yes, exactly.
And he trolls us well.
So, we are about 40 minutes into this conversation, and we want to be respectful of your time. So we are at that point where it's puff, puff, pass. And we're going to try this a little differently. So just go ahead. Puff, puff, pass.
All right. Puff. So this industry is one of the most interesting things as an economist I've ever got to look at. There are new markets popping up everywhere, and it's a place where I've gotten to use, in the purest sense, my education, which I feel that hardly anybody gets to do. So that's number one. Number two, I've really enjoyed getting to see the degree of creativity, entrepreneurship, problem solving, and just really that Denver right now is cannabis Silicon Valley, and then other cannabis Silicon Valleys are sprouting up in Silicon Valley itself, LA and other places. So just getting to see that has been, and just to see like how American that really is right there. And, I think that's one of the best things about what's happened since Colorado and Washington legalized cannabis. And then the thing that's not so good, I think right now, a lot of people that you hear and you listen to that are in and around the industry are, very interested in this. This is their new issue, and they're very interested in cannabis and CBD as medicines. I've heard people say that CBD can cure just about anything right now. THC too, give it to your pets too while you're at it, and I just think, we're at a real risk that this could end up being snake oil here with some of this. So let's walk that back a little bit. Let's say what it is, because what it is still remarkable, in my opinion. So that's something that I could do without. So there you go. Puff, puff, pass.
I love it.
That was great.
So, and just kind of in closing here, we wanted to thank you for the work you're doing, Adam. Most of what we do for our clients really is advocacy work, and that can't happen without, this actionable, reliable data that that people use to build their businesses. So keep it up, and thanks.
Well, thanks, Ann, and thanks, Louis, Shay. Really enjoyed being here with you guys. Thanks so much.
Great. Cool. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks to Adam Orens, the founding partner of the Marijuana Policy Group. Find out more about them by visiting their website at mjpolicygroup.com. If you want to chat with us, you can find us at Instagram and Twitter with the handles at KCSA_cannabis, as well as KCSA-cannabis.com. Or feel free to drop us an email if you have any questions. If you want us to interview someone, we're more than happy to hear from you at greenrush@kcsa.com. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe to the Green Rush in your favorite podcatcher. That's one take, Shay. One take.